Kesrel had performed exactly 47 waste sphere inspections in her career. Each one was the same: a dead rock floating in space, radiation readings, toxin measurements. A quick report, and then home to her family on the consortium capital world. Waste Sphere 7 Gamma was supposed to be no different. She stood at the observation window of her inspection vessel. As the blue and green planet grew larger in front of her, the sight made her pause. Most waste sphere were brown or gray or black. This one had colors she rarely saw in dumping worlds. Blues and greens and whites swirling together like a painting. "Run the atmospheric scan again," she told her assistant, a young Valkyrie male named Dorek. "I already ran it 3 times, Dorek said. His voice was strange, tight. "The readings are correct." Kesrel looked at the data screen. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among her people. 8 billion life signs. "That cannot be right," she whispered. The consortium had been using this planet as a dumping ground for over 3,000 standard years. Every failed biological experiment, every batch of radioactive waste, too dangerous to store on civilized worlds. Every chemical compound that could melt through ship hulls. All of it had been sent here to this small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. Nothing should be alive here. Nothing could be alive here. Yet the sensors did not lie. 8 billion warm-blooded creatures moved across the surface below. They had cities. They had technology. Primitive by consortium standards, but technology nonetheless. "Pull the historical records," Kesrel ordered. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. "Every survey ever conducted on this world." Dorek worked at his console. After a moment, ancient data filled the screen. Kesrel read through the files with growing horror. The first survey was conducted 4,000 years ago. A routine check of the planet before it was designated for waste disposal. The survey team had noted the presence of primitive mammals. Hairless creatures that walked on 2 legs and lived in small tribal groups. They used stone tools and fire. They had not yet developed written language. The consortium scientists of that era had calculated their survival chances once dumping began. 0%. The note at the bottom of the survey was written in cold clinical language. It stated that the primitive life forms would be eliminated within 200 years of regular waste disposal. Their extinction was considered acceptable. The planet's remote location and lack of strategic value made it perfect for waste storage. Kesrel felt sick. She scrolled through more records. A second survey conducted 500 years after dumping began. The scientists had expected to find bones. Instead, they found the mammals still alive, still breeding, still building. The report noted this as an anomaly and recommended increased dumping to finish what they had started. The dumping was increased. A third survey, a fourth, a fifth. Each time the scientists expected extinction. Each time they found the creatures still there. Adapting, growing, building larger structures, developing more complex tools. By the 10th survey, someone had given the creatures a name. They called themselves humans. The consortium stopped sending surveys after that. It was easier to simply not look, to pretend the waste was falling on empty rocks. To file the paperwork and move on to the next dumping run. 3,000 years of poison had fallen on this world. 3,000 years of death raining from the sky. And somehow, impossibly, the humans had survived all of it. Kesrel turned away from the data screen. She walked back to the observation window and stared at the planet below. Somewhere down there, 8 billion beings lived their lives without knowing the truth. They woke up each morning without knowing that the galaxy had tried to kill them. They raised their children without knowing that their very existence was considered impossible. "What do we do?" Dorek asked. His voice shook. Kesrel closed her 4 eyes. This was beyond her authority, beyond anyone's authority at her level. She was a simple inspector. She measured radiation and checked toxin levels. She was not equipped to handle the discovery. That the consortium had been accidentally poisoning Ascension species for 3 millennia. "We report," she said finally. "We report and we let the council decide." She returned to her command chair and began composing the most difficult message of her career. Her fingers trembled as they moved across the console. She chose her words carefully, knowing that they would cause panic at the highest levels of consortium government. The message was simple. Waste Sphere 7 Gamma was inhabited by Ascension species. The species had been exposed to consortium waste for over 3,000 years. The species was still alive. She sent the message and waited. The response came faster than she expected. Within 1 standard hour, her communication console lit up with an incoming transmission from the Consortium High Council itself. The face that appeared on her screen was one she recognized from news broadcasts. High Counselor Vethrin, leader of the consortium's governing body. "Inspector Kesseril," the High Counselor said. His voice was calm, but Kesseril could see the tension in his features. "You will speak of this to no one. You will delete all records of your findings from your ship's database. You will return to the capital immediately for debriefing." "High Counselor," Kesseril said carefully. "The records show that we have been." "I am aware of what the records show," Vethrin interrupted. "This situation requires careful management. The humans must never learn what we have done. Do you understand?" Kesseril understood. She understood that she was being asked to participate in the cover-up of the greatest crime in consortium history. She understood that her career and possibly her life depended on her obedience. She also understood that 8 billion innocent beings had been poisoned for 3,000 years by an organization that considered itself the moral authority of the galaxy. "I understand, High Counselor," she said, but even as she spoke the words, something had changed inside her. Some small seed of doubt had been planted. Some tiny voice asked a question she could not silence. What else had the consortium hidden? The transmission ended. Kesseril sat in silence for a long moment. Then she turned to Dorek. "Make a copy of all data," she said quietly. "Every record, every reading, every file. Store it somewhere safe, somewhere the council cannot access." Dorek stared at her. "Inspector," the High Counselor ordered. "I know what he ordered." Kesseril looked back at the planet below, at the blue oceans and green continents. At the swirling white clouds, at the world that refused to die. No matter how much poison the galaxy threw at it. "Make the copy, Dorek. Something tells me those humans will need it someday." Far below, on the surface of the planet called Earth, a young girl named Maya looked up at the night sky. She was 12 years old and she loved the stars. She had a small telescope that her parents had given her for her birthday. And she spent every clear night searching the darkness for new wonders. Tonight, she spotted something unusual, a faint light that did not move like the other stars. It held perfectly still against the background of space. Like an eye watching from the void. She did not know that she was looking at an alien spacecraft. She did not know that the light in her telescope belonged to a ship full of beings who had just discovered the greatest secret in the galaxy. She only knew that the universe was vast and beautiful, and full of mysteries waiting to be solved. Maya made a wish on the strange new light. She wished to know everything, to understand every secret the stars held. To finally learn the truth about her world and her place in the cosmos. She did not know that her wish would soon come true. She did not know that the truth would be far more terrible and wonderful than anything she had ever imagined. She only knew that the night was beautiful and the stars were calling her name. Above her, the inspection vessel began its journey back to the consortium capital. Kesseril sat in her command chair and thought about the humans below. She wondered what they would do when they finally learned the truth. She wondered if they would forgive the galaxy for what it had done to them. She wondered if they would even survive long enough to find out. The answer to that question would change everything. It would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. It would force every species in the consortium to confront the darkness in their own history. But that was still in the future. For now, there was only a blue planet spinning through the darkness. A planet of survivors. A planet of beings who had looked death in the face and refused to blink. A planet that was about to meet its makers. And heaven helped them all when it did. The news of first contact spread across Earth like wildfire. Within hours of the first confirmed sighting, every television channel carried the same story. An alien spacecraft had been detected in Earth orbit. The vessel had remained stationary for 6 hours before departing toward deep space. Scientists around the world scrambled to analyze the data. Religious leaders offered prayers and warnings in equal measure. Governments held emergency sessions behind closed doors. Humanity was not alone in the universe. For most people, this was a moment of wonder. Streets filled with crowds staring up at the sky. Children pointed at stars and asked their parents which one the aliens came from. Scientists wept with joy at the confirmation of their life's work. Philosophers debated what first contact would mean for human identity. But in the halls of power, the reaction was different. Admiral Chen Wei stood before the United Nations Security Council and delivered his assessment. His face was grim, his voice was steady. "We have been visited," he said, and then abandoned. The vessel made no attempt to communicate. It simply watched us and left. That is not the behavior of a friendly species. That is the behavior of a species that wanted information without engagement. The delegates shifted in their seats. The implications hung in the air like smoke. "We must prepare," Admiral Chen continued. "We do not know what they want. We do not know what they are capable of. We only know that they know we exist. And they chose not to say hello." 3 months passed. The world held its breath. Then the consortium returned. This time they came with a proper delegation. 3 massive vessels entered Earth orbit and broadcast a message of peace and friendship in 17 different human languages. The translation was imperfect but understandable. The consortium had just discovered humanity. They wanted to welcome Earth into the galactic community. They came as friends. The world celebrated again. But this time there were more questions than answers. United Nations Secretary General Amara Okonkwo led the human delegation that met with the consortium representatives. The meeting took place on the largest of the 3 vessels, in a chamber specifically designed to accommodate human physiology. The aliens had done their research. The atmosphere was breathable. The gravity was comfortable. The lighting was adjusted to human preferences. The consortium ambassadors were a species called the Velthari. They had 4 eyes and skin that shifted colors based on their emotional state. Their leader was a tall being named Torval, and his skin glowed a warm orange that supposedly indicated friendliness and openness. "We are honored to meet you," Torval said. His voice was smooth and practiced. "Humanity is a remarkable species. We have studied your broadcasts and been impressed by your culture, your art, your resilience. The consortium welcomes you as valued members of the galactic family." Secretary General Okonkwo smiled politely. She had spent 30 years in diplomacy. She knew when someone was hiding something. "We are grateful for your welcome," she said. "But we have questions, many questions. We have been watching the skies for centuries, hoping to find other life. Why have we never detected your signals? Why have we never found evidence of your civilization?" Torval's skin flickered briefly. A flash of something that was not orange. "The galaxy is vast," he said smoothly. "And we are careful. Contact with new species is a delicate matter. We prefer to observe before we engage." It was a reasonable answer, but something about it did not sit right with Okonkwo. She filed the feeling away for later. The negotiations continued for weeks. The consortium offered technology, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs. They promised to share medical advances that would end most human diseases. They spoke of faster-than-light travel and energy sources beyond anything Earth had imagined. In return, they asked only for friendship, partnership, trust. It all seemed too good to be true. And then the message arrived. It came through unofficial channels. A data burst transmitted to Earth's deep space listening stations. The source was untraceable, but the content was clear. Thousands of files. Thousands of documents. Thousands of years of secrets. The message was from someone called Threll, a species called Morthaki. An archivist who had spent decades studying humanity. An archivist who could no longer stay silent. Secretary General Okonkwo read the files in her private office. She read them twice to make sure she understood. Then she called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. They have been dumping poison on our world for 3,000 years, she said. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. Every plague we could not explain, every cancer cluster without apparent cause. Every zone of mutation and death, it was all them. The consortium designated Earth as a waste disposal site before we developed written language. They have been trying to kill us since before we knew they existed. The chamber erupted in chaos, delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded immediate military action, others called for confirmation of the data. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had heard. Admiral Chen was the first to speak once order was restored. The files are authentic, he said. Our analysts have verified them against every available source. The radioactive signatures in our soil match the consortium's industrial waste. The chemical compounds in our water match their failed experiments. The timing of our worst epidemics matches their dumping schedules. He paused and looked around the room. They have been murdering us for 3,000 years, and now they want to be our friends. Secretary General Okonkwo raised her hand for silence. The room slowly quieted. We have a choice, she said. We can respond with anger. We can demand justice. We can threaten war against an enemy that possesses technology far beyond our own. Or we can do something else. She looked at the faces around her. Faces from every nation on Earth. Faces that had spent centuries fighting each other over land and resources and ideology. Faces that had somehow found a way to work together despite all their differences. They expect us to rage, she said quietly. They expect us to threaten and bluster and ultimately fail. They have seen countless species do exactly that. They know how to handle anger. They know how to manage threats. She stood and walked to the window that overlooked the city below. Millions of people going about their lives. Millions of people who had no idea what had been done to them. What they do not know, she continued, is what we became while they were poisoning us. They do not know what their waste made us. They do not know what 3,000 years of adaptation has created. She turned back to face the council. We will not respond at all. Not yet. Let them wonder. Let them wait. Let them learn what it feels like to be watched by something they do not understand. The council voted unanimously. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on a single course of action. Silence. The consortium delegation waited in orbit for humanity's response. Days passed, then weeks. Their messages went unanswered. Their requests for meetings were ignored. Their gifts sat unopened in diplomatic pouches. Ambassador Torval paced the deck of his vessel and tried to understand. He had dealt with dozens of newly contacted species. Some had been angry. Some had been afraid. Some had been overwhelmed with joy. None of them had ever simply stopped talking. What are they doing? He asked his aides. Why will they not respond? No one had an answer. Far below on the surface of the poison world, humanity went about its business. Farmers tended crops that grew in contaminated soil. Workers built cities on foundations of radioactive waste. Children played in fields where alien bioweapons had failed to take hold. They had survived everything the galaxy threw at them. And now they knew why. The galaxy owed them a debt beyond calculation. And humanity was very, very patient when it came to collecting debts. The consortium had made a terrible mistake. They had not simply failed to kill humanity. They had accidentally given humanity a reason to pay attention to the stars. And now the stars were going to learn what that meant. Dr. Yara Mady had spent her entire career studying human genetics. She had published hundreds of papers on human adaptation and evolution. She had won awards and received grants and earned the respect of her peers around the world. None of it had prepared her for what she was looking at now. She stood in a laboratory deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Around her, a team of scientists from every major nation worked in stunned silence. They had been given access to consortium medical technology. As part of the first contact agreements, they had been using it to study human biology at a level never before possible. What they found had rewritten everything they thought they knew about their own species. The cellular structure is remarkable, said Dr. Kenji Watanabe, her colleague from Japan. His voice was hushed with awe. Look at the mitochondrial adaptations. These are not natural mutations. These are responses to specific environmental pressures. Dr. Mady nodded. She understood human cells had evolved to process compounds that should have killed them. Radiation that would destroy other species was absorbed and neutralized by human tissue. Toxins that would paralyze alien nervous systems were broken down and converted into harmless substances. Humans were not simply survivors. They were biological recycling plants. It gets stranger, said Dr. Olumide Adeyemi from Nigeria. He pulled up a new display showing brain scans. The human immune system has developed responses to threats that do not exist naturally on Earth. Our ancestors developed antibodies to alien bioweapons before those bioweapons were ever released. It is as if our evolution knew what was coming. That is impossible, Dr. Mady said. But even as she spoke, she knew that impossible had lost all meaning. The data continued to accumulate. Human bones were denser than they should be, strengthened by constant exposure to heavy metals. Human eyes had adapted to see wavelengths that no earthborn creature needed to see. Human pain tolerance was off the charts, calibrated for injuries that would never occur in a purely terrestrial environment. 3,000 years of poison had not killed humanity. It had upgraded them. Far above the laboratory, in a consortium vessel still orbiting Earth, the aliens were reaching similar conclusions. Chief Science Officer Vellner stared at his data screens and felt a cold terror spreading through his body. His species, the Dramaki, had been responsible for the bioweapon dumps on Earth. His grandfather had personally approved the last major release, confident that it would finally eliminate the stubborn mammalian infestation. Instead, it had made them stronger. Their immune systems contained markers from 17 different consortium bioweapons. Vellner reported to Ambassador Torval. Weapons that were designed to be 100% fatal. Weapons that wiped out entire species on other worlds. The humans simply absorbed them and moved on. Torval's skin had gone a pale gray, fear, uncertainty, dread. How is that possible? He asked. I do not know. Vellner switched to another display. It gets worse. Their cellular regeneration rates are 30% higher than any species on record. Their stress responses are calibrated for conditions that would kill most consortium species instantly. They can survive in environments that would require our people to wear full hazmat protection. He paused and looked directly at the ambassador. They can breathe the air on Waste Sphere 12. They can drink the water on Waste Sphere 23. They could walk unprotected through the radiation zones on Waste Sphere 7. Their own planet, without any ill effects. The implications hung in the air between them. We did not poison them, Vellner said slowly. We inoculated them. We spent 3,000 years giving them resistance to every deadly thing in our arsenal. We created the most adaptable species in the galaxy. And we did it completely by accident. Torvald sank into his chair. His skin cycled through colors too fast to read. The council must be informed. The council already knows, came a new voice. Both aliens turned to see High Counselor Vethran stepping through the door. He looked old, tired. The weight of 3,000 years of secrets pressed down on his shoulders. I have just returned from an emergency session, Vethran said. The situation is worse than you know. The archivist's Threll has released everything. Every dumping record. Every survey. Every internal memo discussing the humans. The entire consortium is in chaos. Torvald found his voice. What do the humans want? They have been silent for weeks. What are they waiting for? That is the question that terrifies me most, Vethran admitted. We have studied their history. When humans are angry, they strike fast and loud. When they are planning something, they go quiet. He walked to the observation window and stared down at the blue planet below. They are quiet now. On Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo finally called a meeting with the consortium delegation. It had been 6 weeks since the truth was revealed. 6 weeks of silence from humanity. 6 weeks of mounting terror among the aliens. She met Ambassador Torvald in the same chamber, where they had first talked about friendship and partnership. But this time, there were no warm words or diplomatic smiles. We know what you did, Okonkwo said simply. We know everything. Torvald's skin went gray again. Secretary General, I want you to know that I personally had no knowledge of these events. The dumping program began long before Okonkwo held up her hand. We are not interested in your apologies. We are not interested in your explanations. We have only one question and your answer will determine everything that comes next. Torvald waited. His body trembled. How many other worlds? Okonkwo asked. How many other planets have you used as dumping grounds? How many other species have you tried to poison out of existence? The question hung in the air like a blade. Torvald glanced at High Counselor Vethran, who had accompanied him to the meeting. Vethran closed his eyes and answered. 17 worlds that we know of are still active dumping sites. 4 of those showed signs of developing life at the time of designation. We do not know if any of them survived. Okonkwo nodded slowly. Her face revealed nothing. Then here is what will happen, she said. You will give us the coordinates of all 17 worlds. You will give us full access to consortium technology and resources. You will provide transportation and equipment, Torvald blinked. For what purpose? We are going to clean them up. The ambassador stared at her. I do not understand. You have every right to demand punishment, justice, reparations. Instead, you want to clean up our waste? Okonkwo smiled for the first time. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who understood something her audience did not. Ambassador Torvald, she said. Your people spent 3,000 years trying to destroy us with your garbage. You failed. Instead, you accidentally made us the only species in the galaxy that can survive your garbage. You gave us immunity to every poison, every radiation, every bioweapon in your arsenal. She stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the stars. You wanted us dead. Instead, you made us uniquely qualified to fix your mistakes. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to take your poison and turn it into gardens. We are going to take your dead worlds and make them live again. She turned back to face the stunned aliens. And every species in the galaxy is going to watch us do it. They are going to watch the victims of consortium cruelty save the consortium from its own crimes. They are going to see what humanity chose to do with our pain. Her smile grew colder. We could have demanded your destruction. We could have turned the entire galaxy against you. Instead, we are going to help you. And that ambassador is a punishment far worse than anything your council could imagine. Torvald understood. Finally, he understood. The humans were not just surviving. They were not just adapting. They were rewriting the moral order of the galaxy. And the consortium would have to live with that for the rest of its existence. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest artificial structure in known space. It hung in the void between three major trade routes. A neutral ground where 500 species came together to debate and decide the fate of civilizations. Today, every seat was filled. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium and looked out at the gathered representatives. 500 species, thousands of individual delegates, millions of years of combined history. And all of them were staring at her. She was the first human to ever address the full council. She was also the youngest ambassador in the human delegation. Secretary General Okonkwo had chosen her specifically because she represented what humanity could become, rather than what it had been. Elena was 28 years old. She had grown up in a village built on the ruins of a chemical waste dump. Her grandmother had died of cancers that doctors could not explain. Her mother had been born with mutations that should have killed her before her first birthday. And here she was, standing before the galaxy, speaking for her entire species. Honored representatives, she began. Her voice was calm and steady. I am here to present evidence of crimes that span 3,000 years. I am here to name those responsible. And I am here to propose a response that I believe will surprise many of you. She activated the display system. Images filled the space above the podium. Maps, charts, chemical analyses, genetic studies. Earth was designated as Waste Sphere 7 Gamma, approximately 3,000 standard years ago, Elena said. At that time, my ancestors had just begun developing written language. We had no cities, no technology, no way to understand what was about to happen to us. She advanced to the next image, a timeline of dumping activities stretching back millennia. Over the following centuries, the consortium deposited industrial waste, radioactive materials, failed bioweapons, and chemical compounds too dangerous to store anywhere else. The cumulative toxin load exceeded safe levels for organic life within the first 100 years. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many species had suspected the consortium of questionable practices. Few had imagined anything on this scale. My species should be extinct, Elena continued. Every model predicted our elimination within 2 centuries. Instead, we adapted. We evolved. We survived. She displayed the biological data that Dr. Mehdi's team had compiled. Human cellular structure. Immune system adaptations. The strange genetic markers that should not exist. The consortium accidentally created the most resilient species in the galaxy. We can process toxins that would kill any other being in this chamber. We can survive radiation levels that would require full environmental protection for your people. We can breathe air and drink water that would be lethal to every other oxygen-breathing species on record. The chamber fell silent. Elena could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on her. But I am not here to threaten you, she said. I am not here to demand vengeance or reparations. Or the destruction of the consortium. I am here to ask a question. She paused and looked directly at the consortium section of the chamber. High Counselor Vethrin sat among his people. His skin pale with shame. How many other worlds? Elena asked. How many other planets have been designated as waste spheres? How many other species might be suffering right now, slowly dying from poisons they cannot understand? Vethrin rose slowly to his feet. His voice was barely audible. 17 active dumping sites. 4 showed signs of developing life when designated. A wave of shock swept through the chamber. Delegates from dozens of species began shouting. The consortium had just admitted a multiple potential acts of genocide. In front of the entire galactic community. Elena raised her hand for silence. The chamber slowly quieted. Humanity proposes the following, she said. We will lead cleanup and restoration efforts on all 17 worlds. We will use our unique biological adaptations to work in conditions that would kill other species. We will bring our scientists, our engineers, our doctors. We will bring our hope. She turned to address the full council. In exchange, we ask only for two things. First, the consortium will provide full access to their technology and resources for this effort. They will fund the restoration of every world they damage. Vethran nodded. This was expected. This was justice. Second, Elena continued. The consortium will not be destroyed. They will not be expelled from the galactic community. They will be given a choice. The chamber went absolutely silent. They can join us, Elena said. They can work alongside humanity in the restoration efforts. They can learn what it means to build instead of destroy. They can show the galaxy that even the worst crimes can be answered with something other than vengeance. She paused to let her words sink in, or they can refuse. They can hide from their crimes. They can pretend that 3,000 years of poison never happened. And they will spend the rest of their existence watching the species they tried to murder. Save the worlds they tried to destroy. Elena stepped back from the podium. The choice is theirs, but either way, humanity will go to those poisoned worlds. We will clean up the consortium's garbage, and we will do it not because we forgive them, but because we know what it feels like to grow up in a wasteland. No other species should have to endure what we endured. The vote was unanimous. The Restoration Initiative was approved by every single representative in the chamber. Even the consortium delegation voted in favor. Too stunned and ashamed to do otherwise. After the session ended, High Counselor Vethran approached Elena. His skin had shifted to a deep purple that she had learned indicated profound emotion. I do not understand, he said quietly. We tried to kill your entire species. We poisoned your world for 3,000 years. Why are you offering us mercy? Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed an elderly woman smiling at the camera, surrounded by flowers in a garden. This is my grandmother, Elena said. She died of cancer when I was 6 years old. Cancer caused by consortium waste that had seeped into our water supply. She spent her last years planting flowers in the contaminated soil around our village. She said that if she was going to die from the poison, she wanted to leave something beautiful behind. She tucked the photograph back into her pocket. My grandmother never knew about the consortium. She never knew why she was sick. She only knew that the world was hard and cruel and full of things that tried to kill you. And she chose to plant flowers anyway. Elena met Vethran's eyes. That is why we offer mercy, High Counselor. Not because we forgive you. Not because we have forgotten. But because we know that the only way to stop the cycle of cruelty is to choose something else. My grandmother chose flowers. My species chooses restoration. She began to walk away, then paused and looked back. You have a choice now too. You can help us plant flowers or you can watch from the sidelines, while the species you try to destroy saves the galaxy from your mistakes. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine. Choose wisely, High Counselor. The galaxy is watching. Vethran stood alone in the empty chamber for a long time after she left. He thought about 3,000 years of decisions, 3,000 years of reports and approvals and policies. That had seemed so reasonable at the time. He thought about the billions of humans who had lived and died on a poisoned world without ever knowing why. He thought about the flowers that grew in contaminated soil. And for the first time in his very long life, he began to understand what true strength looked like. It did not look like power. It did not look like vengeance. It did not look like the cold calculations of cost and benefit that had guided the consortium for millennia. It looked like a young woman with a photograph. in her pocket offering mercy to those who had tried to murder her ancestors. It looked like humanity. 20 years had passed since the Restoration Initiative began. Threll, the Morthaki archivist, who had revealed the truth about Earth, stood on a hillside and watched the sun set over a valley that should not exist. The sky was purple and orange, colors that would have been impossible here just 2 decades ago. The air smelled of growing things, of life returning to a place where nothing should have survived. This was Waste Sphere 12, or as the humans called it now, New Dawn. Behind Threll, a group of children played in a meadow. Some of them were human. Others belonged to species that had been developing on this world when the dumping began. They had survived just barely, hiding in caves and eating whatever scraps they could find. That did not kill them outright. The humans had found them during the first cleanup expeditions. Starving, sick, barely clinging to life after generations of slow poisoning. Now their children played with human children under a clean sky. Beautiful, is it not? Threll turned to see Captain Maria Santos approaching. She was one of the original cleanup team leaders, now retired but still visiting the restoration sites whenever she could. Her hair had gone gray, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "I never thought I would see this," Threll admitted. "When I released those files, I expected war. I expected revenge. I expected the humans to destroy everything the consortium had built." Maria smiled. "We considered it. Believe me, there were many voices calling for exactly that, but then we asked ourselves what kind of species we wanted to be." She gestured at the valley below. Fields of crops stretched toward the horizon. Rivers ran clear through channels that had once been toxic sludge. Animals grazed on grass that had been engineered specifically to break down consortium contaminants. We decided we wanted to be the species that turned poison into gardens. Threll nodded slowly. 20 years of watching humans work had taught the old archivist many things. They had taught Threll that revenge was easy. Healing was hard, and the humans always seemed to choose the hard path. In the distance, a consortium vessel descended toward the main settlement. More supplies, more volunteers. More of the species that had tried to murder humanity joining the effort to restore what they had destroyed. The consortium itself had fractured after the truth came out. Some factions had embraced the Restoration Initiative with genuine remorse. They sent their best scientists, their brightest engineers, their most dedicated workers. They wanted to make amends in whatever way they could. Other factions had refused. They claimed the humans were exaggerating. They insisted the dumping had been justified. They retreated into isolation and denial. Those factions were shrinking every year. It was hard to maintain denial when the evidence was broadcast across the galaxy. When the restoration sites became tourist destinations, when species after species watched the humans transform wastelands into paradises. "Have you heard the latest news?" Maria asked. Threll shook his head. "They found something on Waste Sphere 15, Maria said. Her voice was strange, thoughtful. "Deep in the old waste deposits, evidence of a previous civilization, a very old one." Threll felt a chill. "What kind of evidence?" "Dumping records. Survey data, designation orders." Maria paused. The consortium was not the first to use that world as a garbage dump. Someone else did it to them, millions of years ago. The implications settled over Threll like a cold wind. The consortium was once like humanity. A species on a poisoned world. It appears so. They survived. They adapted. And then they forgot. They became the very thing that had tried to destroy them. Maria looked out at the valley. At the children playing. At the ships bringing supplies. At the flowers blooming in soil that had once been toxic waste. The humans found records of that ancient civilization too. They were called the Vorathi. They poisoned dozens of worlds across the galaxy. And then they vanished. No one knows what happened to them. Threll understood. The Vorathi had started a cycle of cruelty that had echoed across millions of years. They poisoned the ancestors of the Consortium. The Consortium poisoned Earth. And the cycle could have continued forever. But it had not continued. Because one species had chosen differently. You broke the cycle, Threll said quietly. Maria nodded. We hope so. We try to teach the children about what happened. About the Vorathi and the Consortium. And Earth. We try to make sure they understand that cruelty is a choice. And so is mercy. Evening came to new dawn. The purple sky faded to black. And stars appeared above the restored world. Somewhere out there more cleanup teams were working on other poisoned planets. More gardens were being planted in more wastelands. On Earth itself the contamination levels had dropped by 80%. Areas that had been toxic for millennia were now safe for habitation. Children swam in rivers that their grandparents had been warned never to touch. And the humans kept working. Kept planting. Kept healing. Kesrel, the inspector who had first discovered the truth about Earth, had become one of the most prominent voices in the restoration movement. She gave speeches across the galaxy about what she had seen. About the humans who should not have survived. About the species that turned its own murder into a mission of mercy. They asked me once what I thought when I first saw their planet. Kesrel would say in her speeches. I thought I was looking at a graveyard. A monument to Consortium cruelty. Instead I was looking at the birthplace of the galaxy's conscience. On new dawn the children finished their games and headed home for dinner. Human children and alien children walked together, laughing about whatever children laugh about across all species and cultures. They did not know about the Vorathi or the cycle of cruelty. They only knew that the sky was clean. And the food was good and their parents loved them. That was enough. That had to be enough. Threll stayed on the hillside long after Maria left. The old archivist watched the stars and thought about cycles. About cruelty and mercy. About the choices that define civilizations. A young human approached as the night deepened. Threll recognized her as one of the teachers from the local school. Her name was Maya. She was in her 30s now, but Threll remembered the stories about her. She had been the first human to spot the Consortium inspection vessel. All those years ago. A child with a telescope staring at the stars. They told me you were here, Maya said. I wanted to thank you. Threll turned to face her. Thank me for what? For telling the truth. For risking everything to show us what had been done to our world. Maya smiled. Without you none of this would have happened. We would still be wondering why our children got sick. Why our crops failed in certain areas. Why some zones were too dangerous to enter. Threll shook his head. I only revealed the information. Your species did the rest. I expected anger, violence, revenge. Instead you chose this. The archivist gestured at the restored valley. I still do not fully understand why. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she pointed up at the stars. When I was a girl I used to make wishes on the stars. I wished to understand the universe. To know all its secrets. To find out why the world was the way it was. She lowered her hand. I got my wish. I learned that the galaxy had been trying to kill us. Since before we could write. I learned that we were accidents. Survivors of someone else's garbage. I learned that the universe was crueler than I ever imagined. Her voice softened. And then I learned something else. I learned that cruelty is not the only option. That every species, every individual gets to choose what they do with their pain. The Verati chose to spread their suffering. The consortium chose to repeat the cycle. We chose to break it. She looked at Threll. That is why we forgive. Not because the consortium deserves it, but because we deserve to be the species that plants flowers in the ashes. We deserve to be the people who turn poison into gardens. We deserve to be better than what was done to us. Threll had no response. The old archivist simply stood in silence, watching this human who had grown from a child with a telescope into a teacher of restoration. Above them the stars continued their ancient dance. Somewhere out there more poison worlds waited. More gardens waited to be planted. More cycles of cruelty waited to be broken. And the humans kept working. Keep hoping. Keep choosing mercy over revenge. They called themselves the Gardeners now. It was a name that had started as a joke among the cleanup crews but had spread across the galaxy. The species that grew flowers in toxic waste. The people who healed what others destroyed. The galaxy had tried to bury them in garbage. Instead, they had learned to bloom. And they were teaching everyone else to do the same.